On the catafalque, in a hall where kings and queens have lain in state, in a coffin draped with the flag he served so constantly, lies the body of Winston Churchill. On the coffin, the insignia of the most noble Order of the Garter. Each of the three armed services has been taking its part to provide the three separate watches. Every 20 minutes, the watch is changed with all the slow, sad ceremonial of mourning. Ever since it was built, almost 900 years ago, this place has witnessed the panoply of history. And now, this man who himself created history and who will be remembered so long as history is read, is fittingly honored. When King George VI lay in state here at Westminster, the queue of people stretched for miles waiting to pay tribute. So it is again. A line of mourners stretching back across the river, the many thousands of people who have come, as so many have before them, to pay homage to greatness. It was the Archbishop of Canterbury who summed it up for us all. Sir Winston's body has been brought to Westminster Hall so that the people might come within these walls and here pay their tribute. A man like this is God's gift to the world. As the Prime Minister said, he was not a world statesman only, but one of ourselves. Perhaps that is a key to the emotions all of us have felt during these last sad days.
Winston Spencer Churchill, mourned throughout the world by everyone who has respect for greatness. And history will confirm that Churchill was great. Lady Churchill, always by his side, shared each reverse and every triumph with him. Winston Churchill made history. He also wrote it. His authorship, brilliant and massive, would alone entitle him to fame and honor. Blenheim Palace, built for that great ancestor of his, Marlborough, was his birthplace in 1874. This is the room itself. And here's a picture of him as a little boy, with his American-born mother, Lady Randolph Churchill. Some of his long curls are still preserved at Blenheim. Now, at the beginning of an army career, young Churchill is an officer in the 4th Hussars. Incredible as it may seem, he took part in a cavalry charge at the Battle of Omdurman in 1898. He went to the Boer War in South Africa. It seems inevitable now that he should have been there. He was captured, but escaped. And he was then valued at £25, dead or alive. It was early in his life that politics claimed him. As Home Secretary in 1911, he appeared, he would of course, at the so-called Battle of Sydney Street. Police and troops were marshaled in this amazing affair against desperate criminals fighting it out to the last. Just an incident in Churchill's political career. And what a career. In the course of it, he was President of the Board of Trade, First Lord of the Admiralty, Minister of Munitions and Secretary of State for War, for Air and for the Colonies, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Prime Minister and Minister of Defense. In World War I, as First Lord, he mobilized the fleet and played an outstanding part in that first great struggle against Germany. This painting shows him and Lloyd George in Premier Asquith's War Cabinet.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you following the Indian situation with the attention it demands? It is your duty as citizens of the British Empire, bearing a share in its responsibilities, to form a clear opinion and make up your minds what ought to be done. Things are going from bad to worse. Great mismanagement and weakness are causing unrest and disturbance to 300 million primitive people whose well-being is in our care. The confusion which exists in the political parties at home may well produce chaos in India. We require to have a clear, practical policy and to pursue it with courage and with conviction. For I feel that the Indian danger will raise a crisis equal in importance to the greatest events in the history of Great Britain.
Out of office between the two world wars, Churchill gave many warnings of the gathering storm.
Sparste, wir sind auf dieser Welt aber!
And when the storm broke, it was not long before he was called upon to lead his embattled country. His wartime speeches are unforgettable.
We tried again and again to prevent this war. And for the sake of peace, we put up with a lot of things happening which ought not to have happened. But now we are at war, and we are going to make war, and persevere in making war until the other side have had enough of it. We have been agreeably surprised that 10 weeks have been allotted to us to get into fighting trim. We are in a very different position from that we were in 10 weeks ago. We are far stronger than we were 10 weeks ago. We are far better prepared to endure the worst malice of Hitler and his Huns than we were at the beginning of September. It is growing in numbers and improving in training every day. I shall not attempt to prophesy whether the frenzy of a cornered maniac will drive Herr Hitler into the worst of all his crimes. But this I will say, without a doubt, that the fate of Holland and Belgium, like that of Poland, Czechoslovakia and Austria, will be decided by the victory of the British Empire and the French Republic. If we are conquered, all will be enslaved, and the United States will be left single-handed to guard the rights of men. If we are not destroyed, all these countries, ancient countries, many of them, will be rescued and restored to life and freedom. It may well be that the final extinction of a baleful domination will pave the way to a broader solidarity of all the men in all the lands than we could ever have planned if we had not marched together through the fire.
HMS Exeter returns to England. Here she is, home at Plymouth. And Mr. Churchill, with the First Sea Lord and the Chancellor, is there to lead the cheering that welcomes the battle-scarred cruiser. Not far from where Ajax had berthed on her return, Exeter now comes alongside. And it's not First Lord, followed by Admiral of the Fleet Sir Dudley Pound, and the C&C Western approaches, board the ship. He greets Captain Bell and Commander Graham, who is still full of shrapnel, they say. Then, standing on a chair on deck, Winston Churchill addresses the ship's company.
All over the world, as you know, your comrades in the Royal Navy are ardently and eagerly waiting for an opportunity to emulate your example.
The war goes north, and in the tempestuous weather of the north, the Royal Navy fights it out with the enemy and keeps untarnished the great traditions of the service on whose courage and skill the life of the Empire depends.
Your countrymen are well content with the manner in which you have discharged your duty. We welcome you here for yourselves and rejoice to show you how heartily we feel towards you after your severe experiences. You are actually the vanguard of the armies which we and our French allies will use during this summer to purge and cleanse the soil of the Vikings, the soil of Norway, from the filthy pollution of Nazi tyranny.
At the critical moment and out of crisis, Britain gets the war prime minister of her desire. Behind Mr. Churchill, the country rallies solidly and resolutely to the task of defeating the most sinister madman that ever aspired to world conquest. The man to beat Hitler is Winston Churchill.
This is how he spoke to the country during the first period of extreme terror.
We shall defend every village, every town, and every city. And we would rather see London laid in ruins and ashes than that it should be tamely and abjectly enslaved.
And again after the fall of France.
Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duty. So bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
The Battle of Britain now, in which the Royal Air Force shattered Hitler's hopes of invasion.
Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.
Britain's great war premier was tireless. Indeed, he worked unceasingly to carry out his declared policy of victory, whatever the cost.
The Imperial Conference, held at St. James's Palace, was attended by members of the Cabinet and representatives of the British Empire and of all the Allies. The King also came to the palace on this important and impressive occasion, delegates being presented to His Majesty who conversed with many of them. For instance, he talked with Mr. Simopoulos of Greece. With Messieurs Cassin and de Jean, 3 French delegates. With General Sikorski, the Polish Premier, with Dr. Gerbrandy of the Netherlands, and of course our own overseas representatives for Canada, Australia, New Zealand and South Africa. And here, yet another historic picture of the King with members of all the nations fighting with Britain against Nazism. In the course of Mr. Churchill's great declaration were included these memorable passages.
Here before us, on this table, lie the title deeds of 10 nations or states whose soil has been invaded and polluted, and whose men, women, and children lie prostrate or writhing under the Hitler yoke. A vile race of quislings, to use a new word which will carry the scorn of mankind down the centuries, is hired to fawn upon the conqueror, to collaborate in his designs of the earth. This then, my lords and gentlemen, is the message which we...
Silence for the Right Honourable Winston Churchill,
The Prime Minister. In September last, ladies and gentlemen, having been defeated in his invasion plans by the Royal Air Force, Hitler declared his intention to raze the cities of Britain to the ground. And in the early days of that month, he set the whole fury of the Huns upon London. The staunchness and vigour of London was fully matched by the splendid behaviour of our ports and cities when they in turn received the full violence of the enemy's assault. We have to ask ourselves this question. Will the bombing attacks of last autumn and winter come back again? Mr. Chairman, we are proceeding on the assumption that they will. And if the lull is to end, if the storm is to renew itself, London will be ready. London will not flinch. London can take it again. We will have no truce or parley with you or the grisly gang who work your wicked will. You do your worst, and we will do our best. While the tire...
Right through the...
that my American forebears have for so many generations played their part in the life of the United States, and that here I am, an Englishman, welcomed in your midst, makes this experience one of the most moving and thrilling in my life, which is already long and has not been entirely uneventful. I wish indeed that my mother, whose memory I cherish across the veil of years, could have been here to see. By the way, I cannot help reflecting that if my father had been American and my mother British, instead of the other way around, I might have got here on my own. Sure I am that this day, now, we are the masters of our fate. That the task which has been set us is not above our strength. That its pangs and toils are not beyond our endurance. As long as we have faith in our cause and an unconquerable willpower, salvation will not be denied us. In the words of the psalmist, he shall not be afraid of evil tidings. His heart is fixed, trusting in the Lord. Not all the tidings will be evil. On the contrary, mighty strokes of war have already been dealt against the enemy. The glorious defense of their native soil by the Russian armies and people. Wounds have been inflicted upon the Nazi tyranny and system, which have bitten deep and will fester and inflame not only in the Nazi body, but in the Nazi mind The boastful Mussolini has crumpled already. He is now but a lackey and a serf, the merest utensil of his master's will. Many people have been astonished that Japan should in a single day have plunged into war against the United States. If we had kept together after the last war, if we had taken common measures for our safety, this renewal of the curse need never have fallen upon us. Do we not owe it to ourselves, to our children, to tormented mankind, to make sure that these catastrophes do not engulf us for the third time? It is not given to us to peer into the mysteries of the future. Still I avow my hope and faith, sure and inviolate, that in the days to come, the British and American peoples will, for their own safety and for the good of all, walk together in majesty, in justice, and in peace.
When Mr. Churchill went to Canada, what a reception he got on arrival in Ottawa. He went to Parliament House to make the second of those great speeches he delivered from overseas. Here he was met by Canada's Prime Minister, Mr. Mackenzie King. Yet another great welcome awaited Mr. Churchill in the Canadian House of Commons.
We have not journeyed all this way across the centuries, across the oceans, across the mountains, across the prairies, because we are made of sugar candy.
Presently, he referred to those black days in 1940, just before the fall of France, and the talks he had with the French cabinet at that time.
When I warned them that Britain would fight on alone, whatever they did, they had done it. England. Some wicked.
Churchill, having served for 2 years as the King's First Minister, chose the anniversary as a suitable occasion for a broadcast. In typically eloquent terms, he reviewed our present situation and sketched a more cheerful picture of the future than he has yet been able to paint since he became Premier.
Now we are no longer unarmed. We are well armed. Now we are not alone. We have bound irrevocably by solemn faith and common interest to stand with us in the ranks of the United Nations. That can only be one end. When it will come, or how it will come, I cannot tell. But when we survey the overwhelming resources which are at our disposal, once they are fully marshaled and developed, as they can be, as they will be, we may stride forward into the unknown with growing confidence. We have a long list of German cities in which the vital industries of the German war machine are established. All these it will be our stern duty to deal with, as we have already dealt with Lubeck, with Rostock, and half a dozen important places. The civil population of Germany have, however, an easy way to escape from these severities. All they have to do is to leave the cities where munition work is being carried on, abandon their work, and go out into the field and watch the home fires burning from a distance.
Mr. Churchill, going to the Lord Mayor's Day luncheon, had a pleasant task before him. And his report on North Africa and the Battle of Egypt was greatly appreciated both inside and outside the Mansion House.
We have pictures. A bright gleam. And warmed and sure all our hearts. And Lieutenant General Montgomery, a glorious and decisive victory in what I think should be called the Battle of Egypt. It has been the Italians were left to perish in the waterless desert, or surrender, as they are doing, by tens of thousands. Germans have received back again that measure of fire and steel which they have so often meted out to others. Ah, this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning.
The occasion was the presentation to Mr. Churchill of the freedom of the city. No one, said the Chamberlain, had ever accepted the responsibility of national leadership at so grave an hour in the nation's history.
The entire British nation and British race throughout the world than this present fearful struggle for the freedom and service of mankind. It is of our own free will, without being ourselves directly assaulted.
Inspected forces who will form part of the spearhead of attack when the signal for our greatest operation is given. Among them, he inspected American paratroops and, of course, addressed them on the subject of the fateful tasks that lie ahead. This was just before his broadcast to the nation, of which the closing sentences are a summary of the situation as it is at this moment. A moment when fully trained, magnificently equipped Anglo-American forces await that signal for the grand assault.
The hour of our greatest effort and action is approaching. We march with valiant allies who count on us as we count on them. The flashing eyes of all our soldiers, sailors, and airmen must be fixed upon the enemy on their front. The only homeward road for all of us lies through the Arch of Victory. The magnificent armies of the United States are here or are pouring in. Our own troops, the best trained and best equipped we have ever had, stand at their side in equal numbers and in true comradeship. And when the signal is given, the whole circle of avenging nations will hurl themselves upon the foe and batter out the life of the cruelest tyranny which has ever sought to bar the progress of mankind.
The burdens of war leadership were immense. Not the least important of his duties were his journeys to battlefronts and conferences with Allied leaders. His cooperation with President Roosevelt was vital to victory. In addition, his own maxim was that anyone who fought against Hitler was a friend. When victory at last drew near, Winston Churchill went to the continent to see for himself. How he must have enjoyed crossing the Rhine. After victory, however, the man who had done so much to achieve it was turned down at the general election. Now Churchill took up his pen again, and from it flowed volume after volume, a tremendous record of those fateful years. He took up his brush, and painting as a pastime, he added to the huge collection of his work as an artist. For Churchill, painting was relaxation. It gave him the adventure that his nature demanded. Presently, the country had a chance to choose again. And this time, Churchill and his party were reinstated after vigorous campaigning by the veteran campaigner. But peace had become a Cold War, and more journeys to conferences were undertaken by Premier Churchill. In Bermuda, for instance, with President Eisenhower, the threat to peace was insistent.
One thing I am quite sure, that if the United States were to consent, in reliance upon any paper agreement, to destroy the stocks of atomic bombs which they have accumulated, they would be guilty of murdering human freedom and of committing suicide themselves. I hope you will give full consideration to my words. I have not always been wrong.
He went on to ask his audience of 2,600 representatives to imagine what would be the position if and when the Soviet had the atom bomb.
You can judge yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, what will happen then by what is happening now. If these things are done in the greenwood, what will be done in the dry? If they can continue month after month disturbing and tormenting the world, trusting to our Christian and altruistic inhibitions against using this strange new power against them, what will they do when they themselves have large quantities of atomic bombs? Meanwhile, we have, of course, a situation in Berlin which may at any time precipitate a hideous world struggle. Had I been responsible, I would not have allowed it to develop in this way.
For his great services to his country, he had been made a Knight of the Garter. This was indeed an honor, crowning a lifetime of service. And Sir Winston Churchill was still at the helm. Then, to mark his 80th birthday, ceremonies were held in Westminster Hall, that silent witness of nearly 1,000 years of history. Two presentations were made to Sir Winston. The first, which was offered by Mr. Attlee, was a joint gift from Lords and Commons, a portrait painted by Graham Sutherland.
But may I hope that you will live to see the beginnings of an era of peace in the world after the storms which has been your lot to encounter. Old age hath yet his honour and his toil. Some work of noble note may yet be done. On behalf of both Houses of Parliament, Prime Minister, I ask you to accept this portrait.
The second, presented by Mr. David Grenfell, Father of the House, was from the House of Commons, a commemorative book. This was an all-party tribute, of course, and it was signed by all but a very few members. In the course of his speech, Sir Winston certainly amused the gathering by his references to the portrait.
To me, the most memorable public occasion of my life. The portrait is a remarkable example of modern art. It certainly combines force and candor. I am now nearing the end of my journey. I hope I still have some services to render. However that may be, and whatever may befall, I am sure I shall never forget the emotions of this day, or be able fully to express my gratitude to those colleagues and companions with whom I have lived my life for this wonderful honor they have done me.
Those birthday celebrations were unique and most moving. Then Sir Winston retired from the premiership, and to mark the occasion, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh dined with him at number 10. But Churchill was still a parliamentarian, and even though his health and vigour had begun to fail, the wisdom of the elder statesman was unimpaired to guide and counsel his successor. No man in our lifetime has better earned the right to withdraw from the scene of action. As he steps from the stage, the curtain falls on a political era.
A vigil day and night at Sir Winston's London home at Hyde Park Gate. A vigil of hope, soon to be mixed with a growing resignation. There seemed little chance of recovery from so grave an illness, and the thousands who made their pilgrimage to stand and wait reflected worldwide anxiety. Newsmen of many nations have been there from the start on behalf of Sir Winston's countless friends and admirers overseas. Their link with the weakening life within, Lord Moran, Sir Winston's lifelong friend and personal physician. The bulletins told of a deepening sleep, of a gradual weakening. Only 6 weeks earlier, Sir Winston celebrated his 90th birthday, appearing at the window here at Hyde Park Gate to acknowledge the crowds of well-wishers. All who were there will remember this glimpse of him. Now they return with their messages and their prayers. In the words of the Archbishop of York at Westminster Abbey, we thank God for his leadership in times of peril and for a life richly gifted and lavishly spent. We pray for God's peace in his heart and in his home. Throughout Britain and the Commonwealth, throughout the capitals of the world, flags have been flying at half-mast. And from all over the world, tributes have been paid to him. In the words of Her Majesty the Queen, the whole world is the poorer by the loss of his many-sided genius. For the first time since the First World War, the Times devoted its entire front page to news. From Parliament, tributes from those who worked with this great parliamentarian. Churchill was above all a leader, but with his courage he had compassion. And all of us who drew strength from his inspiration also keep for him a special place in our hearts.
Well, I think he was one of the finest men that this country has ever had. Probably he wasn't right in all his opinions, but if he made up his mind, he stuck to it, and he didn't care whether he offended or pleased.
He had something special about him. The way he spoke, he was a great orator, and he could do many things that other people couldn't do.
I think probably he was the greatest man that I've ever known, and I think it's the inspiration that he gave us during wartime. I was in the RAF, and the inspiration he gave us as a leader during the last Great War, I think, in my estimation, led us to the ultimate victory.
Well, I'm not of the generation to have known him personally, but from what I've read, from what I've heard of his speeches, and from what I've seen, he is, to my mind, the greatest man of the 20th century. I would like to have known more of him. I'm sorry that he's gone, very sorry indeed. And I'm quite sure a lot of young people feel the same.
Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duty. So bear ourselves as if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years. Men will still say, this was their finest hour. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.
Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill, Knight of the Garter, Order of Merit, Companion of Honor.
Ah, this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is perhaps the end of the beginning.
Following the gun carriage, his family and close friends. in the first carriage his widow and his 2 daughters.
There can only be one end. When it will come, or how it will come, I cannot tell.
Officers of his own regiment, the Queen's Royal Irish Hussars, bear his orders and decorations. So began his last sad journey. Winston Churchill served his country and the world as a champion of democracy. But before we end, we recall an earlier glimpse of Blenheim, the family home of the Spencer Churchills and the birthplace of this, their greatest son. Sir Winston would often look across the park towards the little church of St. Martin at Blaydon. Often he would come in later years to this quiet churchyard where, by tradition, the Churchill family is buried. It was his wish that here he too would lie, and not so very long ago, as he stood beside the cross that marks his father's grave, close by the place where lies his brother, John, he chose his final resting place. Next to the grave of his mother, the mother he loved so dearly, he pointed to a plot of ground and said, "This is my place, here. Here, and in the hearts of us all."
Lift up your heart. All will come right. Out of the depths of sorrow and of sacrifice will be born again the glory of mankind.
Another Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Churchill, wore a smile of complete confidence when he recently toured blitzed areas. Do you remember what he said afterwards?
I've come back not only reassured, but refreshed. To leave the offices in Whitehall with their ceaseless hum of activity and stress, and to go out to the front, by which I mean the streets and wharves of London or Liverpool, Manchester, Cardiff, Swansea, or Bristol, is like going out of a hothouse onto the bridge of a fighting ship. It is a tonic which I should recommend any who are suffering from fretfulness to take in strong doses when they have need of it.
Though the winning of victory may be hard and slow, victory is certain because the invincible spirit of Britain will receive full support from the West, from America.